Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Hamilton Rodriguez here on the Outsiders podcast. We strongly apologize for being tardy today, but unforeseen circumstances happened, and things happen in life. But we're here with an extraordinary individual, strong-minded, strong-willed, and he has a life story to share with you guys, and some business sense, mindset sense, and life experience sense. And I invited this individual to my show because he has some powerful things to talk about life, business, and things in general. Well, let's give a round of applause for Junior. Interview with Junior today. And Junior, how do you want to be introduced here? Do you want to be called Junior or?
How you guys doing? Um, I grew up in Roxbury, and a lot of the people who follow me on Facebook follow me under Julian Logan. And if you've been following me throughout the years, you know my story within the last 7 years. And some of you grew up with me. We grew up in daycares together, so I don't think there's any need for introduction. But those that don't know me, it's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you specifically here on the podcast. I've been invited by Hamilton. Time is limited, so I can't give you the whole encyclopedia version of my story, but I will share a couple of thoughts with you that are dear to me. I'm going to start with a topic that I believe has global impacts, a topic that I believe can help free thousands of people across the country. It's concerning adolescent brain development, some new science that came about several years ago. And around 2016, 2017, I became hip to it, and I've been fascinated with it ever since. Um, I actually wrote a memorandum of law, an affidavit that influenced Committee of Public Counsel, CPCS, to create a whole unit of attorneys in Massachusetts to help discover if there were any things that could be done to help. And as far as I know, a recent case that was decided in the Commonwealth was based on the argument that I helped encourage and introduce to the Committee of Public Counsel as a legal beagle. Now, for those that don't know what a legal beagle is, I will tell you what it is, and I'll give you a little bit of more information about me that can help you understand where I'm coming from and how I came across the knowledge that I have today and why I'm so passionate about this. I myself was a victim, still a victim now, of wrongful conviction, it's known as in Massachusetts. And wrongful conviction is when a person is incarcerated against the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of Massachusetts, which are protections that say that the courts must follow this, this, and that, and that they have a burden of proof, so on and so forth. And that's how that's what you would expect. So when the court veers from that, then you have what is called a wrongful conviction. So back in 2004, after I would say a kidnapping. That's a word that people can understand very well. After my kidnapping and incarceration and helplessness, I turned to the law library, and I actually became a certified paralegal. And a certified paralegal, for those that don't know, we're kind of like the chef in the kitchen in a real nice restaurant, or maybe a running back. The quarterback throws the ball, we get the ball in. So I started researching my case. And for the record, for those of you that are not familiar with the details of my case, it's printed online. The appellate version is printed online, and it's under Commonwealth versus João Pedro Barbosa Jr., aka Julian Castle Logan. The João Pedro Barbosa Jr. spelled JoaoPedroBarbosa. And essentially, I was convicted with zero evidence. Zero evidence. I was convicted in a court that didn't have venue. I was arrested by officers that didn't have jurisdiction. They were outside their jurisdictional territorial. There's no victims in my case. I never had a chance to cross-examine my accuser, and there was just nothing there. and I fought it. I'm still fighting it now. And so on my journey to becoming my own attorney, which I had to do, it wasn't a luxury. I had to do it. I started learning more about the law, and I became, if not the one, but one of the most impactful jailhouse lawyers or legal beagles in the history of Massachusetts. I did tons of work. I helped people reverse first degree life convictions that were wrongful. I basically was the in between inmates that couldn't articulate the facts of their case, understand the law, or both. I was the intermediary between them and their attorneys, in some cases, them and the courts. And I spent a great amount of time in the law library. Anyways, the case that opened up the doors for the issue I want to address today, that I believe will have global implications, is Roper and Miller. These are two Supreme Court cases that basically said that kids at the age of 16 and under 18 actually cannot be sentenced to a first degree life sentence, that it was cruel and unusual punishment to put a child in prison for their whole natural life. And I've always been a big fan of psychology. So as soon as I read the facts and the findings in the case law, which I encourage you guys to look at if you're interested, or if you have loved ones or neighbors that might have been affected by the decisions in this case. As soon as I read it, I said, wow, okay. So someone's shining the light on an issue that's important, affects a lot of people, yet has never been debated. So I did a little bit more research, and the facts that the decision was based on were adolescent brain development science, where a group of doctors through MRI discovered that the human mind in general doesn't become an adult until around 25, and for some even later than that. So that from birth to 25, we are developing consistently. And many of us know about neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is another area of psychology that I'm a great fan of. And neuroplasticity basically says that a 65-year-old can learn Chinese, right? So it means that the brain is shapeable way into adulthood. So we can actually keep learning, keep growing, and keep learning and keep growing. Our brains grow. So think about a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 21-year-old, and then a 25-year-old. There's a progression in control. There's a progression in the ability to control one's actions and the ability to make decisions. There's a progression in how important peer pressure is, how important it's not. It is development in the decision whether you're going to be a risk taker or not, so on and so forth. And if you're interested, I suggest you Google it: adolescent brain development, risk taking, crime, so on and so forth. So anyways, the doctors wrote articles, theses, and they testified in front of the court. And essentially they convinced the judges in the Supreme Court of the United States, which as far as I know is the highest court of these United States. They convinced them that because of these deficits in the ability to control one's behavior, that a child could not be punished, could not be given the death sentence, and could not be sent to prison for life for something they may have done when they were young. So I said, okay, that's great. But what the courts didn't do in the Supreme Court that I picked up on immediately is the courts didn't recognize that the doctors articulated very clearly that this science not only applies to 16-year-olds, but the science also applies to groups going all the way up to 25 years old. And another thing that the Supreme Court didn't recognize is that the punishment part they did recognize, but the Supreme Court didn't recognize that because of a child's age and because of a child's inability to do what they're supposed to do, that the child might not be responsibility for might not be responsible for committing a crime. So in other words, a child could not possibly make the correct decision when faced with danger and the ability to act and be responsible for what they do might not reach the standard of responsibility that a reasonable person would have. Because the doctors that the decision was based on clearly said that children respond different to danger than adults. That children exaggerate what's in front of them. So an adult similarly situated to a child would not respond the way a child would. So my legal mind clicked. I said, hold up. I said, so this is kind of like a diminished capacity argument. This is almost like an adult who's convicted of murder, but he has evidence that he was provoked. Let's say, imagine a bar fight. There's a bar fight, somebody gets hit with a bottle on the head, he's bleeding, he reaches for something, he strikes the person that hit him. So we all know that the courts in most situations would say, well, he was provoked, or maybe this was done in the heat of passion. And for those that don't know the law, the jury instructions or the defense of manslaughter is what is called an affirmative defense in the constitutions of the United States, as well as the Massachusetts Declaration of Right, Article 12, allow those faced with a criminal charge to present affirmative defenses. So I said, okay, so if a child in the similar situation of an adult is faced with some danger, some perceived danger, that child exaggerates that danger greater than an adult. For example, there's a popular case in the Boston Roxbury community. I'm going to say Wendover, probably one of the most popular cases in the history of Massachusetts. The facts of the case, the people involved, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to mention no specific names in this program. That's not my position. But in the position, a young man was attacked by several young men. This is something I've gone through before. And this young man who was attacked ended up stabbing one of the young men involved, and the young man died. May God rest his soul, and may God rest his soul, and may his family, excuse me for bringing up the facts of their case, if they indeed recognize the facts of their case. So the young man was able to prove to the second jury, he went to 2 trials. In the second jury, he was able to be exonerated, found not guilty on self-defense, which is also an affirmative defense. Now, he didn't bring up adolescent brain development, but the point that I bring up is the facts of his case, because the young man that I'm talking about was 16 years old at the time. So in today's world, post-adolescent brain development, he would have been able to, in addition to self-defense, he would have been able to present evidence, or I'm suggesting he should have the right to present evidence of adolescent brain science to help the jury understand the mitigating evidence of his inability to properly make decisions or to judge danger at that moment, or at least to compare what an adult would do with what he would, or what he actually did. And what I'm proposing today, and what I'm going to be fighting for, is a legislative change that jury instructions in any crime that requires any form of specific intent be changed. And I'm also going to propose that the age group from 21 under are not charged with first-degree murder or second-degree murder, or in case the legislator wants a way out of that, I'm going to propose that the legislative body allow every single defendant under the age 21 to be able to present evidence from a psychologist or a neurologist to present facts of his case and facts of his mindset and the biological facts that doctors across the country have now expounded upon that would make it impossible in some circumstances for the child to properly be convicted on any crime of specific intent. So now to give you some background, in the legal world, words are extremely important. So specific intent is a type of theory that requires a person to be able to calculate and make a decision that a normal person would do. So in murder, there's premeditation. And premeditation is the ability to think something out before you do it. So now when we go to adolescent brain science, we find that children in a lot of situations might not be able to properly premeditate anything. See? So now why is this important? To make a long story short, recently in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, SJC, which is the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, one of the highest courts in the country, or in the state at least, made a decision in Commonwealth versus Mattis. And in Commonwealth versus Mattis, the Supreme Judicial Court reduced the life sentences of, I believe, upwards of 200 people that committed offenses of murder that were under the age of 21. So these young men and women who were convicted, some in the 70s, some in the 80s, some in the 90s, some during the 2000s, were serving natural life sentences for murders that they committed, and they were under 21 years old. And for those that are interested in getting a little deeper into this, the case law is Commonwealth versus Mattis, spelled Mattis. So in Mattis, again, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts said, hey, this is cruel and unusual punishment to convict a person underneath the age of 21 because evidence says that children underneath the age of 21 don't have the ability to properly make decisions, to properly be responsible for a crime. And this decision in Mattis is a continuation, I believe, of the case Commonwealth versus Diachenko, which is a case that's very hard for me to pronounce. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but I'm pretty sure if you Google it, you'll find it. Because in Diachenko, after the Roper-Miller decision in the Supreme Court of the United States, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts also adopted the rule that those that committed a crime underneath the age of 18 could not be sentenced to life in prison. And before the Diachenko cases, there were actual people convicted in Massachusetts that committed crimes of murder or crimes of specific intent that were treated as adults. So I say all of this to say that we need the legislative body in Massachusetts to change the procedure which adolescents are treated, the procedures that are used to rehabilitate adolescents. And I'm encouraging those in power, those in positions of decision-making, those in positions of interpreting the Constitution now to take the very next step. And this is a step I encouraged in 2017 where I pushed the Committee of Public Counsel to adopt the study of how adolescent brain development affects the 18 to 21 crowd. And let's be very clear that the doctors that testified in the testimony that was received and accepted in both the United States Supreme Court and the Massachusetts Supreme Court both said that the mind doesn't fully develop until a person's 25, and some even after that. And we all know that even as adults, that we kind of, we sometimes we're not, every day we're not all there. So it's not that hard to believe. So I'm proposing that all of the men and women in Massachusetts that were allowed a lesser sentence by the decision in Mattis, that they're all allowed a new trial. And this is key. to anyone who has any loved ones or anyone that they care about, even if that person is the neighbor. This is key. Why do I say this is key? This is key because the court has already made a decision that under the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution, under Article 14, I believe it is, of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, or Article 12, that this group of people under 21 that were once serving natural life sentences for crimes they committed while they were under 21, it would be cruel and unusual punishment to keep them in prison for life because they were incapable of properly making decisions that could make them full responsibility to reach the standard of specific intent and premeditation and malice aforethought, extreme atrocity, and all of these different specific elements that are in these different statutes that convict people of first, second-degree murder. In addition to that, again, we don't have that much time for me to fully expound on this, but I am available. You could find me online, Julian Logan, Facebook. You can call me, 857-505-7817. I am writing documents on this. I plan on writing a book. I'm willing to do lectures. I'm willing to meet one-on-one. I'm willing to give case law, and I'm willing to debate the position. And in addition to that, as I move to a different subject, in addition to that, the doctors also expounded that the community that the child grew up in has a lot to do with how the child acts. The peer pressure. We know a lot about our children are involved with gangs. We know that poverty plays a role in this. The adolescent psychologist says poverty plays a role. Lack of education plays a role. And a big thing too is what the children see in their neighborhood and the trauma that they might have experienced. This further impedes a child from properly being able to weigh in on the decision. So again, my demand to Governor Healy, my demand to Mayor Wu, my demand to the Chief of Police of Boston, and all those involved in caretaking, making sure that the community is safe, making sure that we're all upright, positive, strong community. I'm encouraging everyone to propose to the SJC, even if only in prayer and not footwork, propose to the SJC that everyone that's been awarded a second degree that was serving the first degree based on adolescent brain development science, that they need a new trial. Why do I say they need a new trial? Because under Article 12 of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, we have something that I was denied in my case. We have a right to present a defense. We have a right to present a full defense. That's a right. It's a legal right in the United States of America. So at the time that these people were convicted under 21, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, and most of them were convicted before the Roper-Miller decision, had not adopted adolescent brain development science. So now we have what is called in law newly available evidence. It's not newly discovered. It's newly available evidence that could have been presented to the jury to allow the jury to make the judgment if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has proven its case of specific intent or any form of malice and aforethought beyond a reasonable doubt. And if those that don't understand the language, again, I was denied this right, and it's an important right, and it was put there for a reason. The standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt means that the Commonwealth has to prove that you committed the crime and that they proved all of the elements of the crime. And this newly available evidence can have an impact on how the jury understands the behavior of one of the 200 men in this group. Okay, on my second topic that I want to discuss, this is something also dear to my heart. There's a type of investigation that's very popular in the community now. It's called the RICO investigation.
RICO.
Rico, we know Rico. I know a real good guy in Brockton. His name is Rico too, and it was a cool name in the '80s. And in Spanish, it means rich man. That's what it means. So the RICO investigation happens in urban areas quite often now. But for those that might not be up to par on the law, RICO statute came in effect in, I believe, 1970. And it was put into effect because the Italian mafia was very popular during this time. And the Italian mafia conducted a lot of organized criminal activity, highly organized criminal activity that made it hard for city police to deal with. So the federal government created some policies, regulations, put some money aside, and gave some cops, I believe the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the power to conduct RICO investigations. And the acronym in RICO, I believe, stands for racketeering. I know the C stands for crime and the O stands for organization. I forget what the I stands for.
Infiltration or something?
I'm not sure, but you can find it. It's online.
Yeah.
But the point of the RICO and how it's being used in our community, the part that I want to deal with, that I want to make sure Mayor Wu gets this message, and the chief of police and everyone involved, and the president of these United States, Donald J. Trump, Governor Maura Healey, something that's it hurts me a lot as a member of society, member of Massachusetts, because the RICO investigations is affecting my community, it's affecting my neighbors, and it's affecting people all across the country. And the part of it that I believe needs to be looked at very closely is that under RICO investigations, crimes go unsolved under the scrutiny of the investigators. There's a couple of popular cases in the community that I'm going to highlight. And again, I'm not going to mention no names, but these cases are woven into the legacy of the community. So the community will recognize the cases when I speak about them. And those that don't know can probably easily find out. But there's a case of a couple of young men. One was wearing a GPS foot monitor, and he's accused of having gone into a barbershop and committing a murder in the daytime. And from what I understand from public records, the body of authoritative people who were investigating the group he was from let it slide for a couple of years. So they knew that this guy was armed and dangerous. They knew he had committed this murder, and there was a loss of life, and that somebody's mother was weeping in the neighborhood. And that they also continued the investigation, and other murders were happening after that murder. There's recorded murders that happened after that murder that were all part of this, cat and mouse game that was allowed to happen until they was able to round up enough people. You see, so what happens there is that there's usually a 3-4 year investigation where crimes of drug sales, murder, and other crimes between neighborhood gangs continue to happen, and there's usually wiretaps involved, and there's usually video surveillance, there's usually infiltration of officers dealing with these gentlemen, and a lot of things are allowed to happen. So I find two things troublesome with that. And the number one thing is, I think we should move towards policing that's on the preventative spectrum versus the prosecution spectrum. Because a very popular thing with the RICO investigations, if you go on YouTube and you do research like I've done, you'll find that at the end of it, a very well-dressed man will usually appear surrounded by government officials, and he or she will announce that they've rounded up 20 to 30 men, sometimes 40 men, and they're usually adolescents, though. This is another thing. Usually the kids that they're investigating are all under 21, and the head honcho, who's probably making $250,000 a year to police our streets, will say, yeah, we've been investigating XYZ for 4 years and we've rounded up 30 men. And and we have a RICO indictment. And we're proud to say that the streets will be a little safer. And there's something wrong with that reasoning, because what they're essentially saying is that, okay, we're going to take 30 men off the street, and in sort of an entrapment type of logic and reasoning, we've allowed them to do everything they've done. We didn't add on to it. Well, hopefully we would hope they didn't add on to it, right? But we've watched them and we didn't stop them, and we've allowed them to fall into the trap where inevitably we knew they were going to fall into. And now we're here to tell you we have a huge indictment of 30 to 40 men that will be going to prison for 20 years. So what I propose to Governor Healy, Mayor Wu here in Massachusetts, the chief of police, and the other people that are responsible for these type of movements is that in RICO, there's only a need for 2 crimes. In order to have a RICO indictment, all you need is 2 crimes. So most of these kids, if you look into these cases, by the time they're arrested, there's 5 murders involved. There's a lot of assault, battery, dangerous weapons. In one popular case in Massachusetts, there were up to 40 guns found. And I'm pretty sure that during the RICO investigation, with all the wiretapping and surveillance and what is called snitching going on within these groups, that they knew of the purchase of every single one of those guns. They knew where the guns were at. They knew where the guns were being used. And they have highly professional people interpreting code language, interpreting music video these kids put out, and everything else. So what I'm suggesting we start doing as a community and as a society is that we use more brotherly reasoning, and that we move towards prevention. So if we're monitoring a group of kids in the community, and the goal is to eventually put them in federal prison for 30 years or life, and that's going to cost taxpayers at least right now probably $75,000 a year. And as prices of things are going up, it's probably
per inmate,
yeah. $75,000 a year per 30 inmates, which they're scooping up off the street that are, committing some low-level crimes and some high-level crimes, but under their surveillance. This thing could easily be stopped, because if you know in 6 months, everything that's going on, you can stop it, you can prevent it. I'm proposing that we move towards a more preventative approach versus a prosecutorial approach. So in other words, if RICO comes in the community, as we know, those who know, have come into various parts of our community. And when I say our community, I mean the community of the people that might know me. I'm from the East Coast. I'm from the Boston area, the Brockton area. That's where I reside. And I'm proposing that when these investigations are conducted, that they're not conducted, first and foremost, that no crime that could be prevented is allowed to happen for the goal of prosecution. We have to remove the game element, because the guy with the suit that's going to talk, 3 years after the first crime gets all of the acclamations for having achieved this big RICO net grab, right? But I'm suggesting now, moving forward, that guy that's getting the accolades for arresting 30 men actually creates a program where he might get 2 men right in the beginning, because they have the power to do this, and prevent the other 28 men from going to jail and possibly being involved in other crimes, or definitely being involved in other crimes.
We have a comment from Tony Barboza. He said, in 30 years, we have had 3 CV RICOs. What about the other groups? It's crazy. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I didn't want to identify any specific groups, but I'm fully aware of those RICO conspiracies. And Tony, It's great that you chimed in. And I would like to say that I challenge Governor Healy. I challenge Wu. I challenge the chief of police of Boston to pull out the RICO, investigations, and let's start. Let's start from the first day to when the guy with the suit goes up on YouTube and says and gives his great speech surrounded by all the government officials that we voted into office that are all making probably $250,000 a year. That probably live in Brookline and Newton, and he gets his clap. Let's pull out the RICO investigations and let's try to measure how much crime happened while these kids were under government watch. Because I know one RICO investigation, one of the three you're talking about, where several murders were committed during the RICO investigation. And some of the groups that you're talking about, when they were arrested, 40, 50 guns were found. So you don't buy 40, 50 guns on the third year, right before you go to jail. That's something you collect throughout the years. And the RICO investigation, again, has the full power of surveillance, of eavesdropping, of snitch, of all types of things like that, where they have full control over the phones of the girlfriends of the participant, of the family members, and things like that. And I know that they can do it because there's a popular case in our community, which I'm familiar with as a paralegal, where a gentleman was in a courthouse in Boston, and a rival gang member allegedly seen him, and they wanted to come and get him, so to speak. They wanted to wipe him off the planet. And in the process, they made a phone call while their phones were being wiretapped. And they sent some soldiers to the courthouse to kill him. And the people who were sent to kill him were intercepted by the police department or the officials responsible for that area. And we can only assume that was stopped because he was at a courthouse. You see? Whereas the situation at the barbershop, which that group was under surveillance also, wasn't stopped. So that's what I have to say about the 30 years and three RICO investigations. We can't change the past. We can't go back and change the past, but we can definitely change the future. And this is something that can have global implications because, again, when you incarcerate 27, 30, 40 of our young men, we're destroying families like my family was destroyed. I've been home 7 years and I own my own business and I do a lot of community work. I'm a good guy now. I'm a real good guy. I almost got wings growing on my back. I don't even jaywalk. And I'll tell you what, I have zero relationship with any of my beautiful children. I have zero relationship. My parents don't live in the United States no more. They're gone. And some of my loved ones have passed away, and I have barely no relationship with any of my family members anymore. So incarceration destroys families, it destroys communities, and the RICO investigations and the way that the guy in the suit, the real handsome guy that goes on YouTube and says, "Hey, we've been watching this thing, and we've gathered 30 kids, we've made the street safer." It casts a heavy stigmatization in the community. It casts a dark cloud in the community. Okay, and that can't be the goal of our government.
Interesting.
The goal of the government can't be to hunt down 30 kids, to watch them commit crimes, to wait until they commit crimes. This is almost borderline entrapment. And then to arrest, to convict, and to put them in a jail cell. And do what? And feed them processed food and charge tax money so G.I. Joe type of guys can walk around with boots and count them and keep them from fighting from each other. We have to move that. We have to move away from that. Okay? So now I'm going to go to my next topic, which is why I believe people in the Cape Verdean community of Boston, Brockton, Scituate, Rhode Island, Providence need to go back to the Bidung idea. So you say, what's the bidong idea? A lot of us forgot what the bidong is. But I'm going to tell you what the bidong is. I remember as a young boy, my grandmother, who was a leader in the family, would buy these
Drums.
these metal drums, and they're oil drums. She would buy them, and throughout the year, she would get a pair of my used pants and a pair of my cousin's used pants, a pair of the neighbor's used pants, and then she would buy other things she found on sale, and she would slowly fill up these drums. And when it was filled, she would put the cover on the drums. She would reclose it, put a padlock on it, and she would write a name on top of it. Okay, and she would send it to Cape Verde Islands. And this is something that was very popular back in the days. It was something that, created pride and was based on pride. It was something very empathetic, and it was something very progressive also. It's something that advanced the lives of those overseas. And one of my favorite memories is that people in the community used to wear rubber bracelets, this black rubber bracelet.
I remember that.
Yeah. So a lot of people forgot about those bracelets. It's not that common no more. But back in the days, friends that I had in the neighborhood that weren't derived from the islands of Cape Verde on the west coast of Africa would call them Cape Verdean bracelets. Yeah, my buddy would say, hey, it's a Cape Verdean bracelet.
Cape Verde bracelet.
So now the history of the Cape Verdean bracelet is important, right? Why? Because every oil drum had a rubber around the entry point where the oil would be put.
Mm-hmm.
And later in my years of studying entrepreneurs and stuff like that, because I'm an avid reader, I read a book about John D. Rockefeller. And guess what? John D. Rockefeller had his engineer design that rubber to the top of his oil drum because there were little drips of oil coming out of each drum. And his engineer said, oh, you don't have to worry about it. We got 7 trillion barrels of oil. What does 2 drops mean? But John D. Rockefeller had amazingly calculated how much a couple of drops of oil from each drum added up to.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, you got to fix that. So that's where that rubber bracelet came from. But the importance of the rubber bracelet is that there was a pride in assisting, helping, working with each other, and putting a little bit aside to people in the community. And I think we've moved away from that. Mm-hmm. And my buddy Hamilton Rodriguez here, he's a realtor. He's a realtor, and we talk often. And he knows everything about buying houses, selling houses, financing, refinances, mortgage rates, remortgaging, buy, sell, flip, all these other stuff. But I always point out, I say, Hamilton, our parents and our great grandparents bought more homes in Massachusetts. At the time, they was making $2 an hour, $3 an hour. Because I'm getting older, but I'm not that old. Mm-hmm. But when I was 14, no, actually I was 12 years old. My first job was at Burger King, 66 Alston Avenue in Brighton. And the minimum wage at that time was $3.45.
You could buy a lot for $3 back then.
Yeah,
it's stretched.
Yes, but $3.45. I was born in a house. I was actually born in my grandmother's house that she owned. She owned a 2-family house in Clarence Street, Boston. And at the time I was working, I was about 12, and I was working without my school permit. You needed a permit. You had to be 14. I snuck into the job, and the whole summer I was lying. I'm not going to lie. I lied throughout the whole summer. The manager liked me. He allowed me to work, but I was working at 12 years old. Mm-hmm. But the point is, my father probably bought his house. His minimum wage was probably $2 an hour. Mm-hmm. My grandmother's minimum wage, I think, if memory serves me right, my grandmother was making like 45 cents an hour when she bought that house. Mm-hmm. Okay. And my grandmother was from a generation where women or girls weren't allowed to go to school. So the only way she signed her name was with an X. Okay. So she didn't know none of these fancy things that Hamilton knew. And she didn't know none of this real estate stuff. But her and all her friends owned homes in Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally owned blocks. My family owned blocks in Boston. Okay. Extended family owned liquor stores, bar rooms. Okay. We owned some of the biggest, most important properties in Massachusetts, and we preserved the city of Boston.
Yes, we did.
Because when my family, which was one of the first families in Boston, I'm literally one of the first boys born in Boston from family that came from the Cape Verde Islands. When we was buying property in Boston, Eggleston was on fire.
Mm,
A lot of Mattapan was on fire.
yeah.
And the legend and the legacy and the mythology says that the Jewish people and the wealthy white people that were moving to the suburbs, such as Avon, Randolph, so on and so forth, that they were actually burning their houses for insurance money.
Yeah, it was a big scandal back then in
Yeah.
the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily Jewish people, but it was just a lot of, how should I say, people that were there prior to the gentrification, reverse gentrification of Roxbury, Dorchester, were putting their houses on fire and moving to the suburbs.
Yeah.
However, so
No, you got to put that on. You got to put that on.
yeah.
Come on.
So basically, there's a book called The Flight of a Jewish Community. So the book talks about what you just said. And basically, there were people in general putting their house on fire, collecting insurance money, especially on Blue Hill Ave, and leaving the city with the insurance money. And that's why the city, the town, the neighborhood of Roxbury, Dorchester was degraded, downgraded, and it was just destroyed properties. And when the Cape Verdeans came into that neighborhood, I believe the 60s or 70s, started populating those neighborhoods, they started getting these properties at a discount price and revitalizing the neighborhood. That's why they call that the Cape Verdean neighborhood, Cape Verdean center, because everyone that migrated to the United States to Boston came to that area and they build up that neighborhood.
Okay. So, okay, I agree with all of that. But my point, though, the point that I want to make to the audience, and this is not to exclude anyone else, is that I often tell Hamilton that those houses weren't bought with real estate meetings. They weren't bought with knowing a broker.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't bought after winning the lottery. They weren't bought after big business deals.
Hard work, sweat and tears.
The hard work wasn't the motive, because I was there and I have a great memory. And like I said, I'm literally one of the first kids to be born in that community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Literally, if I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm not the first.
Your parents,
Yeah.
your grandparents,
Yeah.
my parents, my grandparents,
Yeah.
they came here with a mission,
Yeah.
an objective,
Yeah.
and that objective was to get the piece of the American pie.
Yeah. So, but I'm definitely part of the first generation, and by the grace of God, I have a very good memory. So I remember the conversations. My father bought a house immediately. My father bought a house a couple of years after he was in America. And my father's mentor, which is we know John Barrows in the community. So John Barrows is actually my little cousin, and his father's my father's uncle and my father's mentor. And he had already had a house when my father bought his house.
Yes.
And he was my father's mentor. So he gave my father the blueprint on how to purchase a home. And my father purchased a home immediately. And my father mentored other people in the community how to purchase a home. So this mentorship program that was going on in the community, without the PhD, without the bachelor's degree, without the master's degree, without even the GED, with very minimal mastery of the English language, was happening over what I tell Hamilton, over some couscous and some coffee. You see? So I encourage the community, especially those that were born like my children's age, that are losing a lot of that or have lost a lot of that, to kind of revisit the idea of family and community in the style that we had it then. Because there were more homes and businesses being bought, and there was more nightclubs and places to celebrate then on a minimum wage of 45 cents, and then at $3.45 when I was about 12 years old. We was buying more, we was doing more, and we had more joy. There was more pleasure in the community. The dopamine was higher.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and the actions had more precision. There was more execution, and there was more accomplishment, what might be called success. There was more success in the idea of the bidon, putting together the bidon, and the idea of having loved ones come to the house and drink coffee and eat couscous and just talk.
Yes, yes.
We had more power. We had more social power. We had less problems, less violence in the community.
Everyone knew everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, can you elaborate a little bit more on this bidon situation? Because I think people need to have an understanding of that connection between the United States and the Cape Verdean Islands. And what did the bidon do for the Cape Verdean community over here and over there?
Okay, that's a good question. I would like to touch upon that in two ways. Again, I'm going to mention my cousin John Barrows, because he was actually called the real mayor of Boston for quite some time, and he had some power and authority. I believe he was the chief economical officer of Boston for about 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, or at least 4. So I remember one time he did a symposium, or maybe we could call it a seminar, at what used to be the Cape Verdean House on Dudley Street. And I don't know if people remember this house, but it was a big house. It was, right now, I think it's a boys club, girls club, and it's orientated towards the African American culture. Mm-hmm. But at this point in time, when we were kids, it was the Cape Verdean House. It used to be called
Community House, Cape Verdean Community House.
Cape Verdean Community.
We used to hang out there a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a basketball court.
Yeah.
And people came in. We did the little 1-2 there. We had our little, thing going on there. And for those that know Roxbury, it's in between St. Patrick's Church and what at this time was called Johnny Ponto. So Johnny Ponto was kind of like the bidon, because this attitude, this immigrant attitude of building wealth, helping each other, showing love, family, community, friendship, was exemplified highly at that, highly. It was exemplified in Johnny Ponto. So as John Barrows was giving his lecture and his symposium in a very academic way to the crowd he had there on economical development and how the Cape Verdeans impact Boston's economy, because for those that don't know, our older family members still own a majority of the property. Well, not the majority, but a great amount of property in Roxbury, Dorchester's residential community. So John Barrows was elucidating upon some of the economical facts in the community, so on and so forth, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And then he opened up the debate for conversation. And what he was saying is basically, okay, so what do you have to say about economical development in the Cape Verdean community, so on and so forth? And he was speaking, of course, in a 21st century sense, and he was speaking as a representative of the mayor's office, because he was a chief financial officer. I said, well, John, one of the most important parts of economical development in the Cape Verdean community is about half a football field away from us at Johnny Ponto. And I stood up, of course, to say this, and I said it as a rhetorical question way to create curiosity, right? And John Barrows and everybody else kind of, they kind of did this with their eyes, like, what is he talking about? What does he mean Johnny Ponto was the head of the Cape Verdean economics? Okay, so for those of us that don't know, the similarity between the bidon, which again is a drum that's still being sent to Cape Verde till this day, the difference between the similarities, actually, not the differences between the bidon and Johnny Ponto, is that Johnny Ponto, for those that don't know, was passed down to Carlos de Pina. Okay, and Carlos de Pina used to own a bar room on Hancock Street called Rendezvous, and then later called Cacalos. And the de Pina family, specifically Carlos, is someone that was embraced by the African American community in Orchard Park. He was a star there. He had so many friends there. His brother has about 6 children from the Orchard Park then projects, which is now known as Orchard Gardens. And Johnny Ponto was basically the gateway to Orchard Park. And he inherited, from what I understand, 27 apartments from his father-in-law, which he managed up until about 2006, when a slickster realtor offered him $7.5 million, and he thought he had hit the jackpot. He sold it and he probably regrets it till this day.
Mm.
So now Johnny Ponto was Carlos de Pina's wife's father.
Mm.
And Johnny Ponto was so popular, and he owned these 27 apartments with commercial underneath, laundromats, grocery stores, so on and so forth. He owned this property back in the 50s, okay? And we're talking about people turning dimes into dollars, turning dollars into $100 bills. We're talking about people building wealth, immigrants. So Carlos Yumanez's wife's father had a system there where people coming from Cape Verde would literally come into his house and pay very, very, very affordable rent to no rent. They were mentored into getting jobs, okay? And they were assisted into buying houses. And I don't have the statistics, but many of the people that own homes in Dorchester and Roxbury these days started their life in Johnny Ponto.
Yes.
Okay, this is a historical fact. So they would go right into Johnny Ponto. They would meet their mentors. They had vans there that brought people to work.
Taught them about the banking system.
Yeah, taught them about the banking system, drove them to work, picked them up at work, brought them home, taught them how to save money, taught them how to buy houses. And these weren't brokers. These weren't realtors. These weren't bank experts. These were just regular people.
Mm.
So I told John Barrows, do you remember that? Have you even ever heard of that? And now everybody in the room looked up to me and said, oh, yeah, you're right, Johnny Ponto. Oh, yeah, we remember that. Mm. And I talk to Hamilton about that all the time because there's a phrase in the streets. This is a street phrase. It's called keeping it real. Or keeping it real is actually a little older. Yeah. Now the newer phrase, and this is getting old, is keeping it 100. Mm. The power that these people had back then is that they kept it 100. And I always point this out too in this sort of conversation. I said, I remember the first lawyer. The first lawyer in the community was Manny Peters.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Manny Peters is a little older than me. Mm-hmm. And his parents had a 6 family on Magazine Street. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't done anything his family didn't do, getting the minimum wage, you know. But so Manny Peters was the first lawyer. I remember the first doctor. It was Sony. Remember that? Sony? Mm-hmm. Sony graduated. Sony graduated as a doctor. It was a big thing because it was a big thing for any black person, no matter where you came from, to become a lawyer. Yeah. My brother, more than likely, is one of the first black people to join the Air Force Academy in Colorado. Wow. Okay, he's definitely one of the first Cape Verdeans from Boston to join the Air Force Academy in Colorado. Okay, it was a big thing. But the point is, today, we probably have 100 doctors in Massachusetts. We probably have 500 lawyers in Massachusetts. We probably have 1,000 engineers. Okay, we probably have right now 200 realtors. But we're doing less now than we did then. How is that? How did Johnny Ponto own 27 apartments? Okay, that were basically managed to empower the people, to help everyone buy a house, to help everyone transition, to help everyone raise a family. How did he own that in the 1950s? And the success was there. The stories, the legends are there. There's myths that have been created around Johnny Ponto that probably even exaggerate his powers.
I hate to cut you off, but we got to talk about Carlos Yumanez. Yeah. You got to elaborate more. Yeah. The guy, strong businessman. We got to bring him to light. Very intelligent guy. He was a trailblazer. Yeah. You knew him better than I knew him. Yeah. You know, let's talk about him for like at least 2 minutes.
Carlos Yumanez, for those that don't know him, and he's known. People who are more Americanized than me might know him as other names, but people know him. And I know a lot of brothers from Orchard Park that I grew up with, that I went to school with, and I did bids with, that know Carlos Yumanez probably better than I know him. But I'll tell you what Carlos Yumanez told me recently. He said, listen, man, because I asked him, I said, Carlos Yumanez, you was driving a $90,000 convertible Benz in 1987.
I remember that Benz.
Yeah. He's driving a Burgundy $90,000 convertible Mercedes Benz, owned a bar, and he owned the 27 apartments, and God knows what else he owns. I said, man, look, And I never met one person that said that he ever put one finger on Carlos. And people in Roxbury, Dorchester have always been afraid. Okay, they've been afraid of that community. And Carlos Umane was in and out of Orchard Park all day and all night.
Yeah.
Some of his best friends lived in the Orchard Park projects. That was considered a dangerous area in that neighborhood.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So Carlos Umane described himself as having so many friends in Orchard Park, so many friends on Dudley Street, so many friends in Dorchester, that when he had a bag of money at the end of the night at his bar, that he would pick any hoodlum in the bar and he would say, "Hey, you, come over here. Go put this in the bank deposit for me right now." That's what he said. He said, "Go put this in the bank deposit right now and bring me my receipt." And he said they would always do it. So that's who he was. He was a very charismatic person. And I remember Carlos in the tradition of men like my uncle, my great uncle, God rest his soul, men like my father, and men like your father. He was a guy that he was a bread breaker. He was a very charismatic person. He is a very charismatic person in the community that by the grace of God was able to receive as much as he gave away. And there's legends and myths about Carlos Umane of how much he gave away. I mean, this guy gave away an enormous amount of money. He was never known as a drug addict, but he went through millions. We know he went through the whole 7.5 million of the 27. You know what I'm saying? We know that. He went through that. You know?
Not to get sidetracked, but there was one gentleman that I knew. You're older than me, but our neighborhood, everyone knew each other. There was one gentleman I want you to talk about, and that person's Crazy John. I'm sorry to sidetrack you, but Crazy John, I looked at him as someone that was ahead of his time. He wasn't perfect, but he was ahead of his time. Can you just briefly talk about who Crazy John was? And because I remember him vaguely. All right. And then we get back on track.
Well, it's not that off track because I want to end with Zaduka. And so Crazy John is a great way to introduce Robert Zaduka House, may God rest his soul. I'm gonna get into a little bit about my life and I can start right now with Crazy John because, as I've already said, I was born in Roxbury. I was raised in Roxbury, and at one point in my adolescence, Roxbury was mines. Okay, it was mines because my family owned a lot of homes there, and it was mines because I had declared publicly that certain areas of Roxbury was mines, and I acted as if it was mines. Okay, and Crazy John is an incredible figure in early Cape Verdean community. He's an incredible figure in general, but I'll first start with how he got his name, Crazy John. A lot of people don't know this, but I know a lot of things. I'm a geek. I was a big connoisseur of gossip, legends, and myths in the neighborhood as a kid. I had great mentors, great mentors. I was around a lot of good storytellers, and Crazy John knew me because I was a slick kid, and he knew all my uncles. So I had a relationship with Crazy John, and even as of recently, when we followed each other on Facebook, I would remind him of this race we had. Because as a young kid, I had a lot of sports cars and I loved racing. I was a big racer, big racer. So I had a Mustang. It was a 5.0. It was a 1987 Mustang, and that was one of the fastest cars on the road then. But Crazy John, what he would do, Crazy John used to build cars. And Crazy John, he's basically, you can call Crazy John. I've said this in public and I'll say it again. Crazy John was like, he started the idea of modifying small Japanese cars. He started that. Him and his generation, okay? It was very popular in the Puerto Rican community, but Crazy John was a leader of that in Boston. So he had this little Toyota Corolla, like in 1969, and the guy was making money. Crazy John made thousands and thousands of dollars a week when the minimum wage was $3. Crazy John was kicking it up. But he didn't buy a Corvette. He didn't buy a Ferrari. He didn't buy none of that. He had this Toyota Corolla, which was like a 69 that used to basically pop wheelies. I'm telling you, this thing would come up off the ground, pop wheelies. This thing was chirping at third, fourth gear. but my Mustang though was one of the fastest cars on the road back then. And my guy Zaduka, which I'm about to talk to, he had one too, and my cousin Tony at the time had one. So all the sisters in Roxbury's, we had these Mustangs because they were very, very fast.
Yeah.
So, anyways, of course, I challenged John to a race. So we went over there in Roxbury by Victoria's, and they had this nice little drag strip right there, and we raced it. He beat me all 3 times. He beat me, no bullshit. He didn't beat me by much, but he beat me. He beat me all 3 times. But Crazy John got his name, Crazy John, from the Boston Police Department.
Roxbury Lords, right?
Yeah. He was an original Lord. He was an original Lord of Roxbury. They gave him that name because Crazy John was basically, he was known as a car thief, and he was really good at what he did. He was really good at what he did. He was a great driver. He was known for his driving skills. He ultimately got paralyzed because he avoided a young boy that was on the street. While he was on his motorcycle, he hit a light post, and he's a paraplegic, but he's still alive today. Yeah, and he's still a big connoisseur of those cars too. He still collects them. But he probably is arguably one of the best drivers in the history of Massachusetts. And I became a very good driver myself during my youth. And arguably, I'm going to speak for myself. Maybe some people listening can back this up. But I also became a very, very, very good driver. And I was considered a driver, period. And I remember as a child when Crazy John kind of acknowledged me one day as, hey, Junior. He gave me that conversation, which made me feel like I arrived. But with that said about Crazy John, I want to mention the great late Robert Zaduka Alves. Zaduka, because I did say here that I would mention him because I think he's a very important figure in our community, especially with what ended up happening in the community, throughout the last 30 years. And Robert Zaduka Alves, Zaduka, God rest his soul, was a buddy of Crazy John's. And he was a couple of years younger than me too. But Zaduka, God rest his soul again, he was fast. He was fast. His soul at the time of his death was probably 33. Wow. And that's not a 33 today. That's a 33 back then, where every 18-year-old was considered men. I don't know. I don't know if you caught that. I know you caught that the end of it, because your mother probably had you acting like a man at 14, right? Better have responsibility, you're a man. Go get a job, all that stuff. So Zaduka at this time, he was probably about 33, but when he passed, he was 19. Yeah. Okay, so he was in today's age, a 19-year-old is basically a kid. And here it is in the beginning of this symposium, I spoke about the inability for adolescents to think properly. And when he passed away, he was 19. And according to today's science, he was a child. He was a child then, but he was fully grown. And I want to talk about Zaduka because a lot of the people who know me across Massachusetts, brothers from, I don't care where you're from. You could be from Corbett Street. You could be from Orchard Park. You could be from Columbia Point Projects. You could be from anywhere. You know who I am. If you was a frontliner, if you was in the game, if you was at the gallery on Mass Ave, if you was getting money, if you was in Deer Island, if you was in Walpole, you knew who I am. And I am the creator of the term Cape Verdean. Because like I said, I was one of the first kids in Boston, born from parents from Cape Verde. And I was born, and no one in the community knew who a Cape Verdean was. And I agree now with what they were saying then, but we talk like right? That's how it sounds. So nobody knew. Well, what's a Cape Verdean? So me and Zaduka, I lived on Shirley Street. Zaduka lived on Monadnock Street. And Monadnock Street is across from Wendover Street. Okay. And recently I had a conversation with a kid. This kid looks like he's 70. but he's probably in his early 40s, and he's from the Wendover Street. He's from Wendover Street, and he heard of me, right? And he says he remembers me as a kid, but I don't remember him. But he was talking the very authoritative history of Wendover Street, Wendover Street, Wendover Street, Wendover Street, Wendover Street. And I looked at him. I said, "Yo," I said, "y'all crossed the street, man." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Y'all crossed the street." I said, "That's all you did. You crossed the street." He said, "What do you mean we crossed the street?" I said, "Because we was on Monadnock Street, right? Because Monadnock Street's in front of Wendover. And Zaduka was from Monadnock Street. So a lot of people that know the history of Boston, right? Some of the more Americanized younger kids that know the history of Boston, you know that Dudley Street probably had a drug trade in the early to late 80s of probably $100,000 a day.
Wow.
Okay, $100,000 a day, and I'm talking about from Dudley Park, Fundozinhos, to where Zaduka was at.
Wow.
On Monadnock Street, you're talking about $100,000 bare minimum.
Wow.
Okay, that's probably a low ball, and this is when the minimum wage was $3 a day.
Wow.
Okay, so I grew up on Shirley Street. That was probably half a mile, we'll say. It's probably less than that, but a half a mile. Emerson School.
Yeah.
And then you got the bridge. You got Upham's Corner.
Yeah.
So now Zaduka was king of Upham's Corner.
Wow. Interesting.
If that area had a king, it was 14-year-old Robert Zaduka Alves. It was 15-year-old Robert Zaduka Alves. 16, 17, 18, 19.
So at age 14, he was controlling people and things.
Yes, he was.
Wow.
He was controlling people and things, and he was earning up to $10,000 a day. Starting
at age 14.
Yes.
That's straight up leadership skills.
Yes. He was driving, or we was driving. He was driving $25,000, $30,000 cars when houses in Boston were $40,000, $50,000.
Wow. Interesting.
Okay. So now the importance of Zaduka in my life is that we have to understand something here, right? We're going back to 1978, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, all the way up to 2025. The world has progressively changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about a young Cape Verdean kid in Roxbury whose parents didn't speak English. Okay, whose father and mother's majority of their life was in a different country, in a whole different culture. Okay, growing up in Boston, and we caught some hell going to school. Yeah. Okay, and people, a lot of people would hate to admit it, but I was like a hero because I had what I still tell my mother to this day. I said, "Mama, I got the strength of 5 men. I have the heart of 5 lions." Because I ushered the kids into school. Dearborn Middle School, I was at the front line. Because some of the other cultures that grew up in that neighborhood with the 4th, 5th, 6th generations in that neighborhood in Orchard Park, which was right next to our school, had been in that crime-ridden community for many, many, many years, and they were rough and tough. They were tough. And our family was trying to raise us as Catholics. Okay, the best way I could describe it, our family was raising us on the principle of turning the other cheek, of being good, of praying, and going to church, and going to school. One day you're going to be a good man. And that really wasn't working out as well as our family wanted it to. And the predominant idea of my group walking back and forth to school was that you don't fight, you don't do any of those things. You know what I mean? But I was one of the kids that said, "No, I'm going to fight back. And we're going to fight back. Not only am I going to fight back for me, but I'm going to fight back for him. I'm going to fight back for her." So those that went to Dearborn at that time remember me as being in the front line and fighting with the biggest, baddest guys in Boston. But I felt alone because no one else was really fighting. Eventually, though, I created a little group around me, and this is how eventually it came to be the Cape Verdean community. A lot of people don't know this. The Cape Verdean community wasn't really the Carlos Yomane. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't your parents. The Cape Verdean community started in the streets of Roxbury because we started to own territory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we didn't own the we wasn't in debt to the bank.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't own Roxbury via the bank.
Mm-hmm.
See, we owned Roxbury via territory on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So now the way I met Zaduka, which is a historical part of the Cape Verdean community in Boston, and I don't care where you're from, brother. You could be from this street, that street, whatever street you're on. That very last brick that you're calling your brick that you put there, kudos to you. But that brick is sitting on the foundation. And this story I'm about to tell is the foundation. Okay? So the way me and Zaduka met, and you got to remember, at this time I had my clique in Roxbury. Den, Capri, and I'm not going to say more names than that. But those two names ring bells. People know who they are. So we had our little force over there. So now, this is going back to maybe the story I'm telling you is going back to maybe 1989, 1990. And I was rocking and rolling. I was rocking and rolling. I was 15. I was fully grown. I already had the $30,000 car. I already owned 20, 30 different cars. And this is facts. This is not something I'm making up. Okay? And Den, God rest his soul, he passed recently. Den was from Roxbury. I'm from Roxbury. And Den and me ended up becoming like this. We was always like this, but we had a little fallout. And I'm going to tell you guys the story of the fallout, because the story of the fallout is how I met Zaduka. And how I met Zaduka has a lot to do with what that community stands for. So I had a girl. She wasn't my girlfriend. She was my boo. I don't know who remembers the Somerville girls, right? But there was a group of some beautiful Somerville girls.
The twins?
The twins, yeah. You had the twins. You had the twins. You had another one called Aretha. She was Jamaican. You had Esther. You had Estelle. They were sisters. And then you had this other one. She was Brazilian. I forget her name, but they was beautiful. They was kind, and they loved us. They loved us. They loved me for sure. Okay, they loved me. So I was fooling around with the Jamaican girl named Aretha. Okay? And we was fooling around. I'll leave it at that. So one day I came on Clarence Street. It was late night. I pulled up on my Jeep. I had a black Jeep. This was 1989. I pulled up on my black Jeep, and I was a cocky kid, so I pulled up, and Den was leaning against the fence right next to Davies, and he was holding Aretha from behind. Yeah, but I didn't think nothing because she was just my boo. She wasn't, this is just a boo. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, yo, let's go. You know what I'm saying? Let's go. And she ain't moving. Den's holding her. So then I finally reached up to her and I grabbed her. And Den's pulling her. So now we're doing the tug of war with Aretha. She's smiling. She got a silly smile on her face, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yo, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So I told her, I said, yo, what's going on? Den said, tell him you're my girl. And she wasn't really saying it. But she had that look like, you know what I'm saying? Something's going on. So I said, yo, man, tell him let you go. Let's go. So Den wouldn't do it. We had some words back and forth, and I smacked Den. God rest his soul, and I love him. We got over that in such a big way. We got over that. We moved on. So when I smacked Den ran home to go get his older brother Georgie. So this was right in the beginning now of that first generation of Cape Verdeans growing up. And his brother Georgie was part of the Lords of Roxbury. And at this time, I'm telling you, we were called the Chargers. That was the name of that crew in that neighborhood, which was later turned into Oilers by some clown who liked the Oilers football team better than the Chargers. I wasn't around. I came back, everybody had Oilers hat on. I was like, what's going on? He was like, well, Oilers is scoring, so there's a history behind the word Chargers. But I'm not going to speak about that. Anyways, make a long story short, after I smacked Den, he ran home. His brother, I was a very strong kid. Thanks to Carlos De Pina's brother, Joe Pina, who had the karate school.
Taekwondo.
Boston Taekwondo. I was one of the first volunteers for that karate class.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't get the black belt, but I've always been a very good fighter, right?
Yeah.
So of course I was coming up, right? I was kind of blooming. So me and Georgie had already had a fight. I had a fight. The Lords of Roxbury were checking me.
Yeah.
Because I was moving around the city like I'm Mayor Menino, right? And they like, yo, who are you, man? You know what I'm saying? So I already fought with Georgie. Like literally fought with him, and he didn't beat me up. This happened at that sub shop right next to Funozinho. May God rest his soul too, because he passed away.
Yeah, East Carter Street area.
Right there. So Georgie didn't want really nothing to do with me, from what I understand. So Georgie went up the street to go get Zaduka. Because Zaduka, even though he was young, God rest his soul again, he was kind of sort of a lord too.
Wow.
Because Crazy John and them, my cousin KC Barrows, who passed away, God rest his soul, he was a Lord of Roxbury. So this was the generation right before me. And no, they were born in CV. You see? So I'm running around like I'm Mayor Menino, and the Lords of Roxbury already got their own thing going. So now Georgie ran up the street to go get Zaduka. I'll never forget this day. I had a Mazda RX-7 that I owned in my mother's yard. So, I was spinning the block, hanging out, chilling. Came home later, my Mazda was vandalized. And the kids in the community came up to me and said, yo, man, Zaduka, Den, Georgie. And they named several people in the neighborhood that came down looking for me for smacking Den, right? Looking for me. So vandalized my car. So basically, I said, okay. I said, that's what they did? All right, cool. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I filled up my Jeep with some of my right-hand men. And I started going around Monadnock Street, Dudley Street, looking for Zaduka. And when I tell you, Zaduka is the only me I ever really met in that community.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That spoke the language, that shared the background, that had the common ground, that was about getting that money, that was assertive, that was, we basically at that age, I was commanding the George Street area, which later became Purple City. Okay. That was my home. That was my neighborhood. And by 1990, what we called Abuzu, people coming in from the outside doing whatever they wanted to do, wasn't happening. That stopped.
Yeah, you guys actually protected
in a sense. No, we did 100%. That's what it started as.
Yeah,
we was protectors because our parents wasn't out there doing it. Okay, and we started buying. Family started buying property there, so we kids like to play football on the street, kickball, soccer, all of that, basketball with crates, all that. So rightfully so, we commanded that several blocks in that neighborhood, right?
Yeah, respect.
So now what happened is I pulled up on Zaduka's block one day and seen him, and I was in my Jeep, and I'm pretty sure he heard of me because when we later on met. I know he knew exactly where I was because he was affiliated with the Lords of Roxbury and he knew we had a movement. Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but that Monadnock Street, which later became Wendover Street, where everybody went, there was only Bobby and Larry, God rest their souls. They passed too. So it was Bobby, Larry, Zaduka, okay, that shared the common ground, okay, that later became the Cape Verdean community.
Yes.
Okay, but Zaduka was the lion. He was the alpha male on the block.
Yeah.
So I pulled up on him with a couple of my hitters.
Yeah.
And I guess he wasn't prepared, so he ran into a restaurant. May God rest his soul, and I took that strategically, and it ended up becoming strategic too. I took it as a win and didn't pursue him. I didn't pursue it. I left it alone. I got into my car and left, and it was a diplomatic move that turned out to be so. So again, as good as my memory is, I forget how we put that aside. Me, Denden, Zaduka, we ended up putting it aside, the brother Georgie. And that moment in time there was the union between the Lords of Roxbury, whichever of them was left, because they were getting old at that time, and the union between Clifton Street, Oilers, and Monadnock Street, because Zuka told us to come on down. Come on down. And there was only 3 deep there. A lot of the brothers that was there was the Duca. They were from Africa. Okay, you had a couple of brothers there who were actually from the continent of Africa, a little further in from where we was at. I believe Nigeria. You had a lot of brothers there from the Caribbeans, Bahamas. I think no, Barbados. Yep,
and Jamaicans.
Yes. Jamaicans and Barbados was on Monadnock. And they fucked with Zaduka. They respected him deeply. But we had more of that. You know, my mother knows your mother. We're speaking this language and the Cape Verdean thing. We had that. And once Zaduka invited us over and we came over, that's later on what became Wendover Street. You see, because I'll throw some names out there for those that might be in doubt. You have Anthea, you have Zifa, you have Little Rocky, you have Miguel Lopes, okay? And a lot of us were family too, you know? And I'll end that story there. But to sum up the conversation I've had with you guys, the RICO situation is very serious. Because it's probably going on right now. There's probably another one going on, and there's no sign that it's going to stop. Okay, the adolescent brain development science is a new science that's been accepted by the highest court in the country. Okay, it's been accepted by the highest court in the state of Massachusetts. The Supreme Judicial Court, again in Commonwealth versus Matters, just adopted the whole science, and they reduce first-degree life sentences for over 200 people that were affected, right, to second-degree life sentences. And I'm proposing that the powers that be reverse their conviction and allow them a new trial, because the judges have made the decision on the sentencing. But in Massachusetts, through Article 12, Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, you have a right to present a defense. They need to be presented with a second jury where they can present the facts of their case, because Lord knows a lot of us that got involved in that lifestyle, we had a lot of trauma. Okay, we were forced to be trailblazers. We were forced to live in a tough community. Many people talk about Melina Cass, but I grew up on crack blocks. Okay, a lot of people forgot about the crack epidemic in Boston. That affected Roxbury.
They were locking people up for that.
Big time.
Now they're giving you treatment.
Big time. Right now, people with needles and drugs right in school zones. Domingo DeRosa just ran a whole mayor campaign about cleaning up parks near the school, cleaning up school zones, school parks, because there's needles in front of the school. No one's cleaning it up. When I was a kid, people were getting 5 years mandatory prison sentences for having just a little tiny bit of drugs in their school zones. That's when there was a war on drugs. So a lot of these men and women that were affected in the 80s and 90s who are incarcerated today, man, their incarceration happened, man, at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And the science today says that people of that age, specifically people who suffer from trauma, poverty, lack of education, lack of guidance, gangs, fear, exasperates the deficits of adolescence. So I'm going to continue the work, but if anyone listening needs to collaborate with me, needs me to talk to their lawyer, needs me to do any of those things, like I said, I'm a certified paralegal. I can read, write law very well. I know the intricacies of this situation very well. I was behind the foreman of the original crew, we'll call them, of lawyers in the Committee of Public Counsel, CPCS, through Donald Bronstein, who was a good friend of mine. I stayed on the phone with him the whole time I was up top fighting my case. Okay, and that's what I encourage. Those are the messages I give out today. We need to stop pursuing kids in the community with the intent of prosecution. We need to move towards prevention, and we need to look into these 200 cases.
Before we close out, I don't think you told the public the final truth when you was what's a proper word, when you were incarcerated. All right. you didn't tell the people what you were doing in there. You helped a lot of people turn their cases.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You helped a lot of kids turn their cases. That's important for people to know.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just didn't go waste your time there. You was very productive in improving yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids, they're adults now, but a lot of them came out early because of you educating them.
Yes.
You're an educator.
Yes.
You're an inspiration to a lot of people.
Yes.
You've affected a lot of people's lives
Yes.
in a positive manner.
Yes.
You know, you are the reason why a lot of people who are wrongfully convicted are out right now.
Yes.
Because they couldn't afford an attorney at the time.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so before we close out, I want you to finalize the difference between a paid attorney and a public defender. People think a public defender is there to help you progress and get through your case and so on and so forth. Tell us the difference. But before you do, this is Hamilton Rodriguez here at the Outsiders here with Junior. He's going to finalize this answering this question, and we're going to be out. Stay tuned for our next episode every Sunday, 2:30. Junior, go ahead.
Well, that's a great question. That's going to require 5 more podcasts to truly answer. But I'm going to try to summarize it as fast as possible. I'm working on a book right now, and I'm going to give you guys a secret. In the first chapter of the book, and this is on my own wrongful conviction because I've studied, I'm a studier. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on my legal education. And Hamilton's correct. I helped hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I did it as a business up there. I had an accountant here that received checks, deposited everything. That's what I did. I was passionate about it. And yes, I did help reverse convictions. But the first chapter of my book is gonna elucidate some facts about the Salem witch trials, because in the history of cases in Massachusetts, and when I tell you I know history of the case in Massachusetts, I know the history. So before the independence of the United States of America, there was really no justice in the courts. And so the only other case I found where a person was arrested, charged, and there was no victims, no evidence, no nothing, okay, and they were convicted was the Salem witch trials, which I think up to 19 women were arrested, charged, and executed with no evidence. They was accused of being a witch. So with that said, the founding fathers of the United States Constitution actually wrote the first constitution here in America, in Massachusetts, called the Declaration of Rights. And they wrote it to protect the citizens of the colonies. Because a lot of people don't know it, right? As Black people, as people of African descent, as former slaves, we tell our stories. Our ancestors, our neighbors tell stories of slavery, right? We're still telling stories of wrongful conviction. We're still telling stories of RICO machines rolling over our kids. We're still telling these stories of poverty, right? But the truth is that George Washington and all of those guys that put together the army called the Patriots, I believe, who overthrew the crown, right? Those people were being oppressed too. So the Constitution of the United States were written to protect the people from any government overpowering. And here in Massachusetts, where the first Constitution was written, the first Black man argued before the Civil Rights Movement or anything for his freedom. He argued successfully. This is going to be in my book. It's a little fact in history no one knows. He argued successfully for his freedom based on that Constitution. So to tie that up with the paid lawyer and the real lawyer, all people in Massachusetts or in the country at large, you should know your constitutional rights. But I'm going to tell you a sad truth that one of my mentors taught me about the law, because a majority of the people who overturn their conviction across the country, and this is a big phenomenon, Massachusetts led the courts in the country with the overturning the wrongful convictions.
Mm-hmm.
I believe last month I was at the hearing of a brother I know from up top who took 28 years to prove his innocence. I was at the Suffolk County Court. Okay. One of the things that my mentor taught me that stuck with me, he says, look, the Constitution doesn't give you a right to counsel, and it doesn't. It gives you the right to assistance.
Big difference.
So if you read the Sixth Amendment, you're guaranteed the right to assistance of counsel. In order to have the assistance, you have to be able to sort of support the counsel. You have to have the ability to understand the law and to apply it.
So that goes back to the poverty thing. So if you're
Yes,
poor,
yes.
you get assistance, but no legal representation.
Well, see, there's two types of poverty, and the poverty that affects the average person convicted of a crime is the biggest poverty of all. There's the poverty of not having money in the bank, and not having a loan with the bank, outstanding loans, not having the fancy cars with the designer stuff, right? But that's one type of poverty. But the poverty that affects the average people who are afflicted by the law is a poverty in knowledge. You see that?
I got you.
You see? So the poverty in knowledge is what leads it's one of the greatest, most beaten paths to the wrongful conviction.
All right. So what's your final words?
My final word is that Martin Luther King Jr. Articulated. It was the premise of his speech, and Martin Luther King Jr. was a Christian, and he always said, or he said a lot of times in his speeches, man, that to be a bystander and not do nothing is to be complicit in that what you see. So my last word is that each and every one of us, man, start playing the role. Put something in that bidon. If there is no more bidon, you don't even know what a bidon is. You need to discover what the bidon is. You need to go find something to put in it and send it to someone. Not just literally, but figuratively. We have to take steps. We have to be more proactive in fixing things, in creating things. And this is how I live my life. This is how I live my life. And I'm encouraging you guys to do that too. And thank you for listening.